Today, I'll welcome Sandeep Rai, CEO and founder of the Circle India, and Mohammad Shoeb, founder and project head of the Panaah communities, for an insightful discussion about their impact in the education sector. So, let me start with giving a brief about both of them. I want to first thank both of you. To begin with, Sandeep is an alum of Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs. That's a leading school within the public policy space. I've already had a guest, Paula Seaman. She's from Argentina, and she spoke to a podcast. Sandeep has worn multiple hats within the global development sector, serving in leadership roles at Teach for India, where he currently serves on the advisory board. He's also the author of the book Grey Sunshine, which explores the existential education crisis in India. The Circle India, founded by Sandeep, is revolutionizing the Indian education system with its best-in-class pedagogy, preparing less privileged students for the future. Now I'll go to Mohammad Shoeb, and then we'll do a deep dive and have a discussion. Mohammad Shoeb is a chemical engineer turned educator and social entrepreneur. Shoeb has over 7 years of experience transforming educational outcomes in the underserved communities. As the founder and project head of Panaah communities, his work focuses on providing quality learning through community mobilization, parental literacy, and employability skill building. Welcome, Sandeep and Shoaib. Great to be here, and I want to thank you for giving time to the Middle Road.
Thank you for having us. Good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Let's look forward to a very meaningful discussion. Let's start with Sandeep. Now, Sandeep, your journey in the global development sector, culminating in the book Grey Sunshine, has been remarkable. The book dwells into like I talked about, the existential education crisis in India, where according to a 2019 UNICEF report, around 30% of students drop out before reaching upper primary levels, that is grade 8. Now, UNESCO data further reveals that India has over 6 million children aged 6 to 13, between 6 to 13, who are out of the school, accounting for a quarter of the global out of school population in that particular age group. You had a fascinating journey from Colombia to Teach for India, and then you also became an author. So would you like to take the audience, and the viewers, what about your journey here?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for that. I'd actually like to start pre my days Columbia, if that's okay. Because for me, this journey really started as a 7th grade science teacher. Like, that's actually where it all began for me. I grew up essentially thinking that I would go into medicine, and a couple of months before I was supposed to go to medical school, had a massive change of heart, had a bit of an epiphany, and realized that I was doing it for what felt like all of the wrong reasons. And so I changed course, left that path completely, decided to basically apply to a program called Teach for America. Ended up teaching in a school in Washington, D.C. Thought I was going to do that for 2 years, to be honest, right? I was like, I'm going to teach. And then after that, maybe I'll go back into medicine, or I'll go back into business. And that was like the handshake that I had with my parents, who were not very happy with me at the time. And I mean, I just had an experience that I think fundamentally shifted me forever. I taught in a school that was incredibly tough. I taught in a school that was, challenging. Like, I taught in a school where, fights were breaking out every day. Police officers were roaming the halls every single day. And I taught in a school where, kids actually hadn't been learning for a very long time. Maybe 10, 12 years, you saw just straight declines in student learning over time. And when you actually looked at the rankings across the district where I taught, the school was actually dead last in both academics, not just academics, but also safety, right? And yet at the same time, like, my kids just showed me that, like, kids can do anything they want, like, kids can achieve anything. Like, demographics doesn't have to determine destiny. My kids showed me that actually, like, given the right amount of inputs, like, they can actually, like, they can prove all the statistics wrong. And I think that journey of basically going down that with my kids and actually seeing kids who, like, the world had pretty much signed off, come back and actually, like, figure out how to basically defy their statistics, I think cemented this belief that, wait a minute, like, there's something to this, like, education matters. Like, I knew it mattered intellectually, But now I really see that it can basically be game changing for kids. And it taught me a couple of things. Like, one is it taught me that schools matter, right? Schools have the power to be catastrophic for kids, or they can be transformational. And it taught me that the difference maker within that is usually people. Like, it's usually the people leading schools and it's usually the people teaching within schools. Those are usually the differentiators between catastrophic and transformational. Everything I've done since has been in service of trying to find those two solutions. And I moved to India shortly after that to basically join hands with Shaheen to basically try to help get Teach for India off the ground. Thought I would do that for a year. There's a bit of a trend in my life. And eventually basically stayed on for 14. And a lot of people ask, well, why did you stay with Teach for India for such a long time? And it's mostly because I just believe very deeply that talent matters, that one of the greatest things we can do to solve this is figure out how to get better people into the equation. And talent is everything. People are everything. And there's no shortcuts around that. And then about 2 years ago, I pivoted to be able to found the circle, which I'll tell you about a little bit more. But that, again, is chasing that same solution. Like, if you can take great talent, you can marry it with great schools and great after school programs, well, then you're likely to creating something that is actually transformational for kids. Starts to goes up somewhat dramatically. And so that's a little bit about my journey. I think Colombia was a bit of a pause in that journey, and it was an opportunity to be able to basically wrestle with some of the theoretical frameworks that might underlie this, but that's a little bit of that journey.
But Colombia did make a difference, right? Colombia, I mean, when you go to America, you go to a leading school, that gives you a lot of opportunity. It sort of is a flux where a lot of people around the world come. And, you have this sort of thinking, because America really gives a huge thrust to people like you who are, thinking out of the box, or they really want to do something within the global development sector. That's how do you rank that as a part of your journey?
Yeah, great question. So, no, my intention was not to undervalue the role that Colombia plays. Colombia, I think, has played an enormous role in my journey over time. I think what it did was a couple of things. One is it taught me how to consume, dissect, analyze voluminous amounts of information, which actually is a very important skill when you're working at breadth and you're trying to basically work with a lot of different pieces. It also just gave me a lexicon. It gave me a language to be able to put to my work, It taught me basically how that could fit in with like a wider global order and what it would mean. It gave me tools to be able to think about development practice. And then finally, it just basically exposed me to a network that I think was like, pretty powerful and pretty transformational, because it was a network of people who also wanted to drive pretty transformational change. So yes, that experience, it was an opportunity for me to pause, because I basically I had been going at it on the ground for a couple of years, and then I said, let me just figure out how to go and learn a little bit more. And I think I deeply value that. But I think that the experience that I got as I paused and chose to learn, I think was deeply, deeply valuable. So yes.
And of course, Colombia is in New York. What could you ask more? I mean, one of the greatest cities. Yeah, so it's
very much so.
Now I'll come back. Now, India now has done quite a good work if you look at, introducing extreme poverty, and that's really commendable over the last decade or so. So the extreme poverty has come to less than 3% in 2022 as per the World Bank poverty clock. But if you look at the sort of figures, if I take, which is like living at less than, so just to give a brief, extreme poverty would be less learning per day as less than $1.9, if I'm not mistaken. And if you are looking at in upper middle income countries, then that figure goes to about $6.85 per day. Now I'm talking about the US dollars. Now, Circle India here is what's good I like about you is like you strive to bridge this education gap by you providing a very high quality K12 education to underserved students in India. And I want to sort of know a bit more about how your impactful undertakings and pathways are addressing what you really plan to do, which is, like you correctly mentioned, a huge transformative change.
Yeah. So I'm going to back up and just tell you, I think, what we believe, because I think what we believe deeply underlies what we do, which deeply underlies, how we sort of look at what's the best way to be able to tackle this issue. So we have a couple of core beliefs, right, that really underlie everything. And one of those core beliefs is that the same belief that actually has cemented my resolve in this space for close to 2 decades now, right, which is that education just holds game-changing powers for kids from low-income communities, right? We know that earning power goes up dramatically the more you go up the education ladder, right? A child basically that graduates from 12th will be earn much more than a child graduating from 10th. A child graduating from college will earn much more than a child graduating from 12th, and even more than a child graduating from 10th, right? A child graduating from a good college in India, right, that fits into your top 50%, earning power continues to go up. The data is clear. The evidence is out there, right? Like we can see it anecdotally, we can also see it statistically. And yet we also know that the vast majority of Indian citizens aren't able to access that, right? We know that that is a privilege that is basically only available for a very small amount of Indian citizens, right? You're talking like less than 20% that end up graduating. And whenever you cut that data even more and you say, okay, well, what percentage of Indians that actually grow up in low-income households end up graduating from college? You're talking less than 10%. In fact, statistics across several communities across India put that number at less than 4%. So you've got this golden ticket that actually gives you like a ticket to a better life. And yet like only so many people get that golden ticket. And we believe that it holds game-changing power, but we also recognize that there is an urgency in the moment. Like we need to figure out how to get that to as many more kids as we possibly can. It is like a moral imperative, but it's also an economic imperative. It's both of those. If we're going to figure out how to basically advance India, we have to figure out how to solve this. So that's one. And the second big belief that we operate with is that, well, schools, the institutions that are designed to give that golden ticket to many more kids, are just going obsolete. And what I mean by that is a couple of big things. One is that, well, India has changed in 75 years, right? The big push to democratize education in India started about 75 years ago. And if you look at where India was 75 years ago, a little bit before when my parents were born, and where India is today, like it is a dramatically different world, and it is a dramatically different country. The workforce has changed. How we interact with one another has changed. Like, our economy has changed quite dramatically. But our schools, well, they've kind of stayed the same, right? Like our schools really haven't evolved at the pace that everything else has evolved. And that's highly problematic. And the second piece that we basically doubled out on is that, well, it's not just that schools need to be reinvented to keep up with the workforce. It's also that, well, whenever you look at the issues that kids today in India are facing, like kids in today's world, kids in today's India, they're going to inherit a long list of challenges that they're going to be responsible for having to figure out how to solve. Pick an issue, pick climate change, pick gender, pick what we face with religious diversity, pick an issue. And kids are inheriting a long list of issues that they will basically be empowered and charged to figuring out how to solve. Our schools do little to equip kids with how to solve those issues. They operate with this assumption that, well, you get older, and when you graduate, then you will figure out how to solve this. We think that both of those parts of the equation are wrong. We think, one, we need to reinvent schools so that they're keeping up with the rapidly changing India. And we think, two, well, we need to reinvent schools so that they're actually preparing kids to be able to solve the world's biggest challenges, not 20 years from now, but today. And we think that is actually going to lead us to a much better India over time. So that's our second big belief, yeah? And our third belief is that, well, we believe that how you reinvent matters. That a lot of people, when they hear the word reinvention, big, shiny, new. And there is something true about that, right? A big part of reinvention is having the courage to radically innovate. But we also believe that reinvention is having the wisdom to say, here's an area where you need to innovate, and here's an area where best practice actually works. Let me innovate in some areas and let me use best practices in others. And reinvention is also recognizing that, well, maybe sometimes we need to just rediscover what's been lost a long time ago. And that's some work that our partners at the Reinvention Lab have done with us to be able to say, actually, let's define what this means. And so for us, we believe that reinvention is having the wisdom to hold all three of those: the new, the best practice, and the rediscovery. Yeah. So you got these three big beliefs, right? Education is game changing. Schools need to be reinvented across two big lines. And the third is that, well, how you reinvent actually matters a lot. That informs everything that we do. And so what we're trying to say is, well, what would it mean to be able to get this network of schools and after school programs off the ground that are emblematic, that are indicative of what a 21st century education could be, that are indicative of what reinvention could mean if you were actually to prepare kids for a changing workforce and equip kids to be able to solve the world's biggest problems. And so what we're on this mission to do is say, can we create as many proof points, as many examples of this as possible, and then use those very proof points to be able to influence change around us? Because what we believe is that the more examples that we can get across, the more likely we are to being able to basically change conditions around us so that it eventually makes its way in to all kids across this country. So let me pause again.
No, it's very interesting. And I also want to share a couple of data points more. You have to also understand that
Sure.
in India, it's only 36% urbanization. If you think about the, even in India, in tier 3 cities or tier 2 cities, you don't have a great schools or colleges. A lot of them are not, I'm talking about both K12 or higher education. So you could understand what would be happening in villages. So, your idea of what you're presently doing or other, through also Shoaib what is doing, it's actually very transformative. It's not only transformative, it's very much required. And that is going to actually change India. Because if you change through the formative years, and that's where the K12 education becomes so important. And that's also one of the hottest debated topics in US. They spend about $1 trillion in education space. I'm not sure about the figures, but I think I read somewhere that it was about $1 trillion in just K12 education. What's very interesting is just this question, which before I go to Shoaib, I'll ask you this question about your book, and that's very important. I don't remember, I was planning to read it, what happened, but there's something very interesting. What I'm curious about is, like, when you do talk about the book, I just wanted to check that did an education in Columbia also help you? Because my writing skills improved after I went to Ford School in Michigan. So that I did my master's in public administration from Michigan, and that also helped me in writing skills. So did that have a small impetus in some ways?
Yeah, so I want to back up and go to the earlier point you said, then I want to come to this point, which is like very much so what we are facing in India is a funnel. And that funnel is real, right? And that funnel gets even more real when you go to rural India. In fact, I spent quite a bit of time over the past 2 months, like engaging with our entrepreneurs who are setting up schools across rural India. And so the funnel of actually being able to basically start with, how do you actually fix it when you don't have high quality, higher universities to be able to basically funnel kids into? And I'm 100% aligned that we have to figure out how to revamp our state of higher education, right? We have about 1,200 colleges across the country that needs to expand quite dramatically, right? And so I do think like our expansion of higher education needs to happen quite dramatically. So just want to +1 to that. And that especially needs to take place in rural India. But I still think we need to start at younger grades and then simultaneously figure out how do you revamp at all grade levels. I just wanted to quickly weigh in on that point. Yes, I think with the book, I think that, look, I mean, I learned how to write first. I like writing, right? I enjoy writing a lot. I learned how to write actually, when I was much younger. I had a tutor that I worked with growing up, and she was somebody who really, really changed how I saw writing. I used to hate writing. I was a fully stereotypical kid. I would come in and love math, and I was kind of ingrained in me as a kid, and so I would just not like to write. And I would always basically be an okay writer, and I would get by with okay writing. And I remember sitting with her one day, and she just tore up my paper. And I was like, "Why did you tear up my paper?" And she was like, "Because this wasn't worth what you are." And she sat with me for months and basically just kept tearing up my paper, sometimes with her hands and sometimes with a red pen. But she just kept pushing me. And in the process, she kept pushing me to read because she basically knew that you learn how to write as you learn how to read, right? And the more you read, the better you'll write. And so I think that process really accelerated this process of writing, and that just strengthened at every level. In college, I had professors who pushed me again and said, like, let's basically push you on writing. And then again, yes, in grad school, I also got pushed a lot. But I think it really started with that tutor of mine in seventh grade.
I need to also correct a particular figure. When I was talking extreme poverty, it's actually $2.15 per day, not 1.9, which I was talking about. So I'll now take both you and also I'll now bring Shoaib into the picture. So just to, what I like is that what you're doing is going to actually make the world more equal because inequality remains one of the biggest drivers of poverty and social discontent. Now, if you look at the World Bank, about 700 million people worldwide live in extreme poverty. That's about $2.15 per day, which I now talked about. Now, I also shared some of the figures. I'll come to you also, Sandeep, but let's now get Shoaib in. And sure, you talk about you're doing something very interesting. You know, you have been incubated at the Circle India. That's it. And you yourself, through the Panaah communities, are doing something very interesting. You're addressing this inequality right in the formative years of education. So, could you, talk about very specifically your experience at the Circle India, how it has helped you, and give examples of how you're changing the K-12 learning experience?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nishant. Thank you so much, Sandeep. I mean, it's like really beautiful to hear. Whenever Sandeep speaks, a lot of what Sandeep shared as his beliefs are things that really resonate with me, and that is why my time at Circle, I just feel that it has been really very productive. So I'll just briefly tell you what we do. So there are two things that we are trying to address specifically, specifically in the Puna's education landscape. So for about 280 primary schools, you just have 44 secondary schools, which means like for 8 primary schools, you have just 1 secondary school. And the second data point, I mean, it's, anyone in education knows, like, if you pick up a grade 7th kid or a grade 8th kid on an average who's studying in a municipal corporation school, will at least have 2 to 3 years of learning gap, which means they might be at grade 8, but their reading and math might be at grade 3 or grade 4. So there's this big, issue of learning quality. Now, how I see this problem, this as an issue is, and, where I saw this as an opportunity as well, is like, if you see around 90% of the funding from CSR or from philanthropy, etc., is going to improve government schools, which is great. I mean, great initiative. We need to work, as Sandeep also said, we really need to ramp up. If you do the math, kids spend around 130 to 140 days in a municipal corporation school, and kids go in school for around 5 hours. If you look at 365 days, and if you look at the waking hours of the kids, what you'll realize is around 89% of their waking hours is actually being spent out of school. So assuming everything that they're doing in school is, really working, still, just 10 to 11% of their time is, being addressed or being, impacted. So this is like a huge gap that we see, and that is where we saw like an opportunity for, an after-school space which needs to exist. Because if that is not there, there's chance that these kids will just roam out in the community, get influenced. In worst case scenarios, they might even get exposed to drugs. And other things that they should not get. So a really, high quality space which can, really address some of these issues and also address, sort of learning time that is that they're spending out of school is what was the sense, and this is how we started. As and when I entered Circle, I mean, something that became really very clear, which Sandeep also spoke about, is like, I asked myself this question: is like someone who's at my center is in grade 5. Will enter job market 15 years from now. Will enter work 15 years from now. Looking at what schools are building as skills today are some of the memory skills. Ability to repeat tasks. You do this stuff. You just copy it down and do the same something. I mean, with AI coming in, with tech coming in, people talking about all of that stuff that's going on. I see a lot of change in the next 3 to 4 years. Forget 15 years. And then if you look at what employers are saying will be skills which will be relevant in the next 10 to 15 years are not the skills which, kids are really building at school. So these were 2 big things that we really thought about. And that is how we came up with a model where we run an innovative after-school learning center where we are reimagining how students actually spend their time at school. So we work with kids coming from the most high need communities, and the vision is, can they get highest quality learning and highest quality resources because they deserve that, and that is what is not happening. So we're sort of trying to challenge the status quo that way, and then see what magic they can bring in. So kids are doing math, English, Marathi, getting their foundations right. At the same time, we have built 6 innovative labs. So we have a tech lab where kids learn coding, they get exposed to AI tools, they learn about language models. We have an entrepreneurship lab, where kids are like, picking up problems from their community and solving it. They're getting some sort of, small little funding, and they're, going on ground and trying a lot of things, building projects, prototyping it, testing on the customers. We have a media lab where kids are learning storytelling, they're learning how to create content. They are, learning how to, make short films. We have a reading lab. Similarly, we have a STEM lab. Similarly, we have, something called as an art lab as well. So kids select one of these labs, and the hope is as they become part of these labs, they engage themselves in performance tasks. They do a lot of work together, so they work in collaboration. They put out projects, they showcase. Some of the skills that they build through this is like, things around cognitive empathy, some sort of advanced level of communication. They build, ability to work together, they do complex problem solving when they're looking at community issues and are trying to solve that. So, the combination of both of these is that we hope that kids come to the grade level because their academics need to be at place, And what we also realized, a sad thing is, of course, there are so many kids who need support and who are not doing well. There's a bunch of kids for whom academics is really working and they don't have an opportunity. So what we did is we just mapped out 15 schools around our center, which are municipal corporation schools. And we just selected top 3 ranks, rank 1, rank 2, rank 3. We arranged for their commute, and all of them come and spend time with us, and they are working on high rigor content. We are preparing them for National Science Olympiads. We are preparing them for Navodaya Vidyalaya exams. We are preparing them for Apsara scholarship exams, PMC scholarship exams, sorry. So as they prepare for these competitive exams, what they're building is competitive aptitude. And then the hope is if they're able to do that over the period of next 5 to 6 years, when they enter their grade 11, grade 12, they'll be much more ready and much better placed to face exams like NEET, to face exams like JEE, and then we can see that we will put kids who come from the most high need communities into top 1% colleges and universities. So that is one program as well. So there are diverse range of programs that we are trying out, but what remains at the core, or what is at the core, is how can we prepare them for future? How can we prepare them for the economy of tomorrow and not the economy of yesterday?
Yeah, that's beautifully put, economy of the tomorrow. What I really love is your tech thing. So let me understand this. You are actually preparing kids. How little are they in the tech skills? Which are you coding? What sort of C language, Python? What are you teaching them?
Yeah. So actually, MIT has built a very beautiful base software for kids, which is called as Scratch. So they start from scratch. And it involves a lot of logical thinking, and it can be categorized as coding. We have partnered with code.org. There are a lot of courses that are available there, and it moves to C, then C++. Then we have a segue where they go to HTML and do website building, and then Python comes at the end. Now, what we have also introduced in parallel is how can they use AI tools in a better way. So kids are actually learning how to use ChatGPT, how to use Midjourney, how to use some of these AI tools, which many of them are saying. And actually, for kids who are in grade 5, grade 6, grade 7, it might sound counterproductive because, many of the schools are saying that, okay, if they learn this, they'll copy their homework. I'm like, great, if they learn this tool and they're able to, really think how can they get their work done faster. I mean, that is one skill that any employer will hire them for, getting work done faster and in an easy way. So
very impressive. As a matter of fact, you should also look at cloud. I use both of them. ChatGPT is good, and we should also always take this technology change as positive. I think that's a good attitude, and I think you're making a fantastic sort of difference. Like you said, you have about 4 centers, 11+ programs, 2,500 students enrolled. And what is impressive is about 80% of the average attendance and 75.27% average mastery across programs for your students. Am I correct here?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just, so what happened is when I started Panaah, I was a Teach for India fellow. So I was doing my fellowship. So that was a year which we were going through COVID. So one innovation that we did through Panaah during that year is we saw that board exams were cancelled. And then a lot of these young adults had nothing to do and they were just sitting at home. And then there were a lot of kids who were not able to go to school. So we mapped them both. So we opened up an online internship across the city of Pune, where we got more than 50 to 60 of these young adults and we mapped them to empty classrooms. So that was the time when we achieved scale. That was the time when we ended up working with around 1,800 kids across the Pune city. So the number that you're quoting, comes from those COVID years. At the moment, as we work with around 4 centers across the city of Pune, we have 450 kids who are enrolled for year-long programs, which will go up to 800 as we move into next year. And then, as you said, really high. So what enables high percentage of attendance, even though it's an after-school program, is the engagement, is the fun that kids have at our centers, is the accessibility. We try to make it like a safe space for kids where they actually feel they're not coming here as an alternate to school, but it's a place where they're coming to hang out. And while they're having fun, while they're hanging out with their friends, while they're engaging in projects and in all of these learning, they build certain skills which they might not realize at this moment, but in future, these will be some of the most valuable skills that they.
Now, I have a question for both of you, but let's start with go back to Sandeep. Now, Sandeep, you had a fantastic experience, leadership experience with Teach for India. How did that translate into the work which you're doing, the Circle India? You have already talked about it, but then here you're doing something very interesting is you're incubating, startups or projects which are specifically within the education space.
Yeah. No, I think it was, Teach for India will always be a part of my DNA, and it is today, and I don't ever see that changing. I think that the experience of starting with Teach for India when, we were 3 or 4 people large when I got there. And so and then basically figuring out how to develop that and develop all of our training and support, develop a lot of how we approached our regional operations, and then to grow that and to be a part of what it meant to grow that organization over time, serving in probably a half a dozen roles over the course of 14 years. And then eventually that culminating in my last 7 or 8 years there, where I was essentially operating the equivalent of a COO-like role, overseeing our regional strategy, overseeing our operations, overseeing a lot to do with our teacher development as well. I just think the combination of operations, of scaling, of working with really complex strategy, all of that coming down to obsessing about one thing, which is how do you make this better for the individual child? And how do you do that through basically figuring out how to strengthen teacher development and the quality of teachers that you get in, that single pursuit, which I think is what Teach for India obsesses about, just taught me a lot. I think figuring out how to fine tune that pursuit and figuring out how to instill that within others, I think it just, one is it cemented probably what will be a lifetime in India, because I think it cemented this belief that, okay, this is what I want to be fighting for. I think 2 is it taught me a lot about what kids need. It taught me a lot about, how do you actually make this work within India? And I think in that process, being able to join hands with alumni like Shoeb and others, to basically help get schools off the ground, also cemented this belief that schools can actually be a part of the equation. And when you look at basically the landscape of India, the educational landscape of India from afar, most people look at it and get a little bit freaked out and say, I don't want to do anything with this. This is too complex, too messy. And especially whenever people think about starting schools, they're like, oh my gosh, this is the murkiest landscape ever. But I think what it taught me in basically going down this process, the closer you lean into it, is there are patterns to it that actually aren't that I'm not saying they're easy, but they're not impossible. And I think it instilled a lot of confidence in being able to do that. And then finally, it's just I think it just helped me hone over time what is an obsessive focus on how do you just make this work for kids from low-income communities, And I think that the act of being able to basically hold that question over and over and over again, I deeply believe to my core is what it's going to take to be able to build a better India.
That's a very holistic approach. Now, taking forward your venture, I come to Shoaib. You work with a very seasoned, somebody who's got a lot of international experience, Sandeep, as a mentor. Now, how did that help you achieve your goals through your present venture? Because that's where everything is translating in the circle India.
Yeah. I mean, this statement that you said maybe, requires a podcast alone, the amount of mentorship and the amount of advices. I mean, I will just tell you, my experience and what, I was discussing with Sandeep in the last, 3 to 4 weeks. So we had a module at Circle where we were talking about culture and where we are talking about, how do you do strategic goal setting. And then, just sitting with Sandeep, I was really very confused in how do you see that future? How do you see beyond 1 year, beyond 2 years? Because as an entrepreneur, you're and especially early stage entrepreneur, you're doing so much firefighting, you're figuring out your funding, your team is not in place, there's so much happening in terms of operations, etc. So, I mean, Sandeep helped me come up with a really beautiful 2-pager, which had our 5-year goals. And then anyone, who has visited center since then has just been super inspired to see that piece of paper, where we said that, total number of kids that we would be serving by 2029 with how many community projects will be launched, how many kids we want to put in high, so top 1% of 2% universities of India, how many dropouts we are going to get back into the system. It not just gave us a sense of possibility, it also gave us a sense of direction. Now, what we did with our team post, that discussion and that module at the Circle is we took that 5-year goal and we converted it to the next 1-year goal. If that needs to happen in 2029, what needs to happen by March 2025? And then we converted into if that needs to happen by March 2025, what needs to happen in the next 90 days? And then, that it is just one example, right from the design of the center, and I would like to, give this invitation to anyone who is in Pune, please do come and visit and see the space. We have really put our heart in terms of, making this and designing this. I mean, one small example, we don't have a teacher desk and a teacher chair. That's a very small thing.
Yeah, I would be coming soon. Don't worry. I'll
Yeah.
surely be maybe this week or next week. I expect me. I'll be there.
100%. And definitely, do come, give your feedback. But what I'm really sure, and what I've heard from people when they visit here is they just, yesterday someone came who's from a CSR background from the last 15 years. This person came, saw the space, and said that, boss, you have built a space of the future. This doesn't feel real. This doesn't feel that, it is existing in India. You've really built something for the most high need communities, which is, coming from the future. So right from small pieces of design of how the classroom should look like, so it makes kids more inclusive, to the 5-year goals. That's the length and breadth of, inputs that we have got, not just me alone, other team members as well, not from Sandeep alone, there's beautiful team that sits at the Circle. There are so many mentors, there are coaches that are assigned. I have personally visited more than 50 high performing schools in India and abroad as well, as part of the incubation, just to see, as Sandeep was talking about, definitely there's innovation, but there's a lot that's already happening. There's a lot to learn from existing best practices as well. Some of the schools that we visited in London really, sparked a lot of ideas, a lot of curiosity, and, a lot of hope in my head saying that, okay, what will it take for us to build, that high quality and as we go on designing something like this. And then it doesn't end. So the incubation for me ends in April. But then what Sandeep and the Circle has said that now as you graduate as an entrepreneur, you move into something which is called as a network support. And what's beautiful about network support is you just don't get support. Now, here's a place where you are now offering as well. I, as an entrepreneur, was able to gain something over the period of last 2 years while designing, right from funding to advice to design to program to ops to team. Now, what is something that I can gain? Yeah, and that, fundamentally as a concept, It's just so beautiful. And then I can already see, our network of circle entrepreneurs and circle, really creating ripples, around Indian educational landscape over the next decade. So yeah, brace yourself. You're going to see something.
Very interesting. I really loved it. I was not aware that you were actually going and looking at schools abroad. So you went to London. Did you go to US? Did you go to Finland by any
Yeah,
chance?
so the other cohort went to Finland because we were like closer to the COVID times, and visas and all were like big issue. So our cohort went to London, but the next cohort went to both London and to Finland. But I think London alone,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
breadth
it's got a
of schools that
fantastic.
we were able to see, something like a London Screen Academy. It just blew my mind how that school is sort of built and how A-level students are just creating films, as their, daily school day to work. And then how that school is funded by Paramount, Disney, and all other top producers across the globe. And then kids graduate A-levels and directly enter into jobs. It was just phenomenal to see.
No, no doubt. I mean, British people are very creative. That's why they are producing some of the best directors. Christopher Nolan, he just won an Oscar. I think one of the greatest directors of all time. Why I was talking about Finland is because Finland is actually the country which did a lot of innovation initially from K12, and then it sort of spread out to the Nordic region, Germany, and then of course globally. So that's the place where actually a lot of formative, lot of creativity has come out. For example, if you should also look at Lego. So they are doing now, children how to drive creativity through toys, and there's a lot of learning within that. So Lego is doing a lot of work in experiential learning within the K12 section. I think I would highly suggest that sort of you look at that also. Now let me come back to Sandeep. Now Sandeep, you talked about a lot of you have written a fascinating book. Why didn't you share something from that book, which is very close to your heart, which sort of you think something which you could share? You've shared a lot of experiences, but something which is very much in the book. This is a time also to tell the audience about your book, that they can buy, what to expect from the book. And here you can take the floor and speak about the book and anything which you want to do. Speak.
Yeah, thank you for that. Before that, I would highly recommend you go and check out Shoeb Center. I would recommend anybody else to as well. So please do that, Nishant, over the next 2 weeks. And anybody else that's basically listening would highly recommend that as well. I think you will find your mind blown when you see what kids and young people from this community can do. So, I mean, look, I wrote this book largely because, like, I was noticing how we talk about education mostly to be a compilation of statistics. And what I was seeing on the ground is that there were real faces underlying the statistics. The statistics were true, but there were real human beings at stake. And I wrote this book in an attempt to say, can we figure out how to basically bring the faces underlying those statistics to life for people? And I was also seeing people, adults like Shoeb and others, that were fighting relentlessly to try to basically change those statistics. And I was meeting them, I was working with them. We were basically like supporting them, thousands of them. And it was an attempt to say, can we bring those stories to the forefront as well? In the hope that we can inspire more people to do this work, in the hope that we can compel more people to do this work. I spent days in communities, like, spending, a week basically like in each community and just trying to basically better understand like the lives of kids, just following kids around and just listening. I don't think I've ever listened as much as I listened as I was basically writing this book, because I just switched my brain to say, just listen to stories and just hear them. And one of the stories that I listened to was a story of a girl named Mehek, and that was in Govandi. And I tell her story often, actually, because it's a story that I think like probably will never leave me, to be honest. And to give you a sense, like, I'm going into this community and I'm talking to Teach for India fellows, and they're telling me, go and chat with this child, Mehek. And so I start to chat with Mehek, and, as I'm sitting there and I'm talking with her, like, I realized everybody pointed me to her. Everybody was like so drawn by her. And that was because she just has this smile that just lights up a room, and she's trying to talk about how she loves Harry Potter and she loves Finding Nemo. And she loves, like, she's telling all the things that she loves about life and about studying. But when you start to talk to her and you start to talk to her teacher, you realize that she's several years behind where she needs to be. And so a couple of minutes into the conversation, she's like, "Hey, do you want to go and meet my mom?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I'd love to come and meet your mom." And so we start walking through the community, and to understand Mahek's life, like understand how Govindi is structured, right? Govindi is actually like one of India's largest slum populations. And it is situated next to this place called the Deonar landfill, which is actually where most of Bombay's trash gets dumped every single day. And this landfill, when it gets really hot in Bombay, well, the trash gets combustible and the trash starts to light on fire and methane starts to rise up. And the methane actually like spreads all across the community, and the debris from the trash starts to litter on the community. And so the closer that you live to this landfill, well, the cheaper your rent is, and the farther away you live, well, the more expensive it is. And so we're walking through the alleys of this community. We get to Mahek's house, and Mahek's house is 100 meters from this landfill. And it's this little tin shed, and there are plastic bottles basically splattered across the tin shed to be able to keep the rain from coming in. And we go into Mahek's house, and we start talking with her mom, who's taken 30 minutes off of work to be able to meet me and chat with me. And her mom cuts cardboard boxes for a living. And her father wasn't able to come. Her father's actually a rag picker in that very landfill. And we start talking for a while, and, you know, Mahek's mom looks at me and she says, all these teachers, they keep telling me how they want Mahek to go to college. They just want Mahek to go to college. And she says, and sometimes I want to believe them. And sometimes I just think that it's a joke. And I'm just like, you don't know what you're talking about. And I paused and I said, well, why would you say that? Why would you say this is a joke? And she says, if you knew what we've been through over the last 10 years, and if you could see the places that we lived, you would know that this tin shed is a blessing. And you would know that we're actually lucky even to be here. And she says, look, and she pauses and she says, look, like I wake up every single day and I do one thing. I pray for a blessing. I pray for a blessing because that's actually what it's going to take to be able to help us get through this day. And so when these teachers keep telling me and talking about college, well, I'm thinking about what it's going to take to be able to get us through this day. And I left that house obviously very sad, but also just thinking about like school needs to work for kids like Mahek. And if we can't get schools to work for kids like Mahek, then like, what's the purpose, And I think I left that thinking that like, we have to get schools to work for kids like Mahek. And getting schools to work for kids like Mahek means that like, we need to understand the conditions that too many kids from India go through that share conditions like Mahek. And we need to understand that the purpose of school has to fundamentally evolve to be able to work for kids. And I think like that's what the book is about. It's about understanding where a very large percentage of Indians live and what they need and what it's going to take to be able to actually figure out how to build a better India. So, yeah.
Let me ask you a very personal question. You become very emotional. Of course, it resonates in the way when you talk about the book. How did writing this book change you as a person?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I get emotional because I just think I think this work has to be personal, and if it isn't personal, then you shouldn't be doing it if it's only intellectual, and so I think that I deeply believe that. And I think Shoeb and others, I think deeply believe that. And I think that's what makes it powerful, I think it stirred my soul. I don't know how else to say it, but I think it stirred my soul. And I think because I paused just to listen. And I had a full-time job as I was doing this. I had a very intense job as I was doing this. And I was operating as a chief of city operations. I teach for India at the time. And so I was spending my weekends and several of my evenings just like researching and getting into communities and interviewing. And I think that time to do that it just stirred my soul in ways that I think will probably be irrevocable. So yeah, that's the best way of being able to describe that.
Before I come to some of the questions, let me go back to Shoaib. Shoaib, we talked about your venture, and there's this where you thought about educating the parents, you bringing the parents within the community. Do speak about that. I think we missed out on that particular aspect of your work.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for bringing it up. So, I mean, a large part of me being in education, and when I say that, I mean like me being in school as well. I just realized that, again, speaking for myself, and this is something that comes from my experience, I just believe that most of the educational institutes have a very transactional relationship with the parent, which means like, you, as a parent, you pay a fee and the child goes and learns. It's the similar case in a government school as well, right? So when our parents called, the parents are called when there's misbehavior. Maybe they're called when there's some sort of distribution that needs to be done. What happens when a parent is called to a school? They're scared, maybe there's like speech follow-up that will happen. Maybe there's like, they'll be made to sit and listen to a lecture on how they can better upbring their child, where the child has done something wrong. So, that is one sense, and that's like one end, and that is where we started thinking of like, how to engage parents as deeply as we can, because, it's sad that it took us a global pandemic to realize, the role of parents is much, much more in the child's learning journey. So yeah, what happens in Panaah is actually, interesting, and, we take a lot of pride in what we do with parents. There's like a set of, meetings that parents attend. And then these are not the type of meetings where, we talk about, we generally believe in catching students while they're doing good versus catching students while they're doing wrong. So we try to bring that up, that's like the smallest piece, and that is for all the parents. The second layer of it is like parents who really want to get involved with us, volunteer with us, and they come to the center and spend some time. The third level is parents, specifically mothers who are done with their 12, who have had some form of education. They have a way to get trained, and then they become teachers with us. So at the moment, we have around 4 of our mothers, who are mothers of our children, are now teachers, and they are like, earning a decent salary with us. As part of a separate program that we also do is we work with them in improving their spoken English. So we run like a spoken English program. I remember the first time I did it was when I was a Teach for India fellow, and I did it for all 25 mothers who were mothers of my 25 kids who I taught, in grade 6, in a school in Gurpadi. I enrolled all 25 of them. 16 of them completed the course, and 3 of them actually started taking spoken English classes at the end of it. So that made us believe, that there's some real power that's there, and there's a lot that we can shift, and there's a lot that parents can do. They just need to believe. They'll come to you and say, I don't know how to read. How can I help my child? So we say, Aapko padhna nahi aata hai, but dekhna to aata hai. Let's start from there. There's a lot that we can do just by seeing and observing. And that is how, our sessions go on. And then, there are a lot of metrics. We have like a parent vision scale where we track, how parents are doing, etc. But I'll pause here. So this is like in a nutshell. It starts from like, engagement that's compulsory to like, parents who are interested, really become part of the learning journey with us.
And it's very interesting because parents, I think that's one of the most innovative ideas which I've thought. I think it's very original. It's the most important aspect, like you correctly mentioned, and that's because abroad the parents are by far much more involved into the education space, specifically during the formative years or the K12, as compared to the higher education. And that's where I think the parents actually really they are the whole and soul. They are the most important because the students or child learns through two. One is the peer, what studies have shown is the what the culture or the parents what they teach you, and second is the peers or where they are actually growing up. So that's how it's so important. We come to the last question. It's always been the aha question. It's been a fantastic conversation. I think we covered a lot of things. Just to sort of also come back, the Panaah initiative, which you're talking about, is going to be replicated all over India, right? It's not just going to be in Pune. That's where you're starting from, Pune.
Yes, we are starting from Pune, and the hope is that it picks up I can't tell you how many interests we have already have had. How many people have just reached out to me and said that, okay, we want 5 like this, we want 10 like this, Can you do 50 in UP? Can you do 20 here? Can you do 10 here? But then what we also realize that we don't want to scale mediocrity. We really want to build scalable depth. And once this happens, I'm sure, in the next few years, we'll hear a lot about Panaah.
Good. That's very interesting to me. So let's come to the aha question. Let's start with Sandeep. Share any experience, and you shared a lot of experience, I know, and you shared an excellent example there. But if you'd like to share anything else, you can share anything which brings a smile or happy memories. We'll start with Sandeep and then go to Shoaib.
I think every time I walk into a classroom or a school where I see things that feel transformational for kids, it's an experience where you walk in and you see kids are on a mission. Like they really care about what they're learning. They're creating something with what they're learning. And they're doing so because they believe it actually matters to their lives. It's an experience that I think just gives me butterflies. Like it's an experience that like makes my stomach turn in the most best ways possible. And that's an aha that I keep chasing. I'm just like, I want to keep basically seeing classrooms that are doing things that are transformational for kids. And I believe the best way to do that is by creating schools that can basically build many of those. So yeah, that's my aha.
And you, Shoaib?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering, I'm just thinking very similar to what Sandeep said, but I mean, something that's like deeply close to my heart is like when I see, people believing in the kids coming from the most high need communities, maybe like a two-liner from Galip can describe it in the most beautiful way. I heard this when I was growing up because I also come from a low-income community. It is my mom who has like done so much, which has led for me to be in a place where I'm doing a podcast, speaking in fluent English, and then startups, etc. So people kept telling me when I was growing up, this is not your destiny. And Galip beautifully says this as हाथों की लकीरों पे मत जाए गालिब, नसीब उनके भी होते हैं जिनके हाथ नहीं होते. So, really thinking more deeply and really believing in each and every child when I see that happening. Not just at our centers. I mean, there are tons of people who are doing like amazing work. There are folks at IT, at Avsara, at Teach for India. So many institutes who are like believing deeply in the kids from the shiny communities. It's like something really special. And a smiling logo.
So thanks a lot. Actually, that was a fantastic session. We, shared a lot of thoughts. We did, talked. It's a very well-rounded discussion. We touched various aspects of the business, personal life, and But let me know if I missed out something. Did I, or would like to speak about any topic which I could have covered?
This sounds great. It was really wonderful talking to you. Nishant, thank you so much for having us. This is a really fun conversation, and yeah, really appreciate you holding space with us.
Sure, anytime. And I'm going to in touch with Shoaib. I think you expect me within the next 10 days. I'm going to be in your place, and I think I'll take a couple of photographs and videos and also put up a separate piece. And you're welcome to write anything under your name as a guest feature. You want to focus anything, that's absolutely great if you want to do things. And the middle road, of course, is into higher education. I mean, I went into higher education within, which works on the intersection of global development and financial services sector through a policy angle and sort of blends media with EdTech. So that's how it's a product as a service platform. And you're welcome. I'm giving a highly discounted rates if you want to access for all your employees. But I really want to thank you. Let's keep in touch. It was just a fascinating discussion. I'm glad, or maybe we should have more of it. As a matter of fact, what do you think?
Yeah,
Would love
absolutely.
to.
Yeah. Sort of a part 2 to this, yeah.
Yeah, anytime welcome. You want to speak because I think you're doing fascinating work. And what's so great about this is because when I heard that you're traveling abroad, you're getting the best business practices. That is great. And this in Sandeep is absolutely right. Over the 75 years, a lot of things have changed, but I think education sector has actually not really changed that much within the K12. You have some excellent schools. I studied in some of the best or very good convent schools initially before I went to public school. Our public school was one of the best schools. And I also went to the central school. So I've seen the K12 education. But then the K12 education has changed so much over the years. And like you said, the road system is no longer followed, and so many creative things have come. For example, just to think about kids doing coding at such an early age, that's going to actually make them a very very formidable people within the tech space. That's excellent. I mean, rather than going to engineering and doing it, you're already doing a lot of things well above, or training in AI. So I think what you're doing is you have brought in some of the best things around the world, and you're giving into to the less privileged section of the society. So that's making the system very equitable.
Thank you so much, Nishant. Really appreciate this.
Thank you so much, Nishant. And I hope to see you soon at the center.
Sure,
Thank you so much for doing this. Yeah, please take care. Thank you so much. Bye, Sandeep. Take care. Thank you.
Bye.